Alright, hello APCSA students. So my name is Ritwik Singh and my partner is Michael Chang. And over a course of videos, we're going to teach you everything you need to know about the APCSA curriculum and help you get a 5 on your exam and become proficient in the Java programming language. Now the first step on your Java journey is to obtain the Eclipse IDE, which is what is usually used in schools for programming. So if you'd like to experiment with the on your own time, then all you need to do is visit eclipse.org/downloads and come to this page. Then you can click download and click the first option. Now you'll be redirected to this page, so click download again. And then save it and the download should start.
Also, do note that we're using Mac OS, so if you're using Windows 10 or 11, the steps may slightly vary. You'll just be downloading a .exe file instead.
Alright, and now the download's almost finished. Okay, so now that the download is done, I can click on it, and it should take me to this file right here. And so all I need to do now, click on Eclipse installer.app, which this will help me get, you probably won't do this in school, but you'll have to do this here so that you can customize your preferences and get the app set up. So, alright, now that we're here, we can select Eclipse IDE for Java developers because that's what you should aim to become, and install. And you can see these folder customization options up here. I didn't change anything personally, but you can feel free to change where you save it for the sake of organization. Now, it should tell you installation completed successfully, and I can launch. And now you should be able to come to this screen. Just again, stick with the default directory, no need to change anything if you don't want to. Now then it should start up, and while we wait for that to finish, just note that again, unless prompted to do so by your teacher, there's no need to change the directory. Everything is fine as it is. Now then, so if you need to create a new Java program, all you need to do is come up to the top here where it says new, click this, and it should give you this drop down menu. And so we're gonna start by making a Java project. And then again, for the sake of simplicity, we'll just call it main. And okay, and then so one thing that you want to avoid is having like this, so just uncheck this box because this will lead to some complications later on, like involving you having to make a package every time you make a class. Now that we have our main class, just right click, select main, and then again we'll start by making your class. So if you didn't see earlier, what I did was I selected the main folder, and then I went up to this, and I created a class. Now we'll call our class main as well. And again, you can see because I unchecked that box earlier, I don't have to create any sort of package name, which is what we want. Again, uncheck this abstract methods and constructors from superclass, as we don't need to worry about this right now. And please do select this first option, because this will allow us to avoid having to type some unnecessary code at the start. And now, after all that, we should have finally arrived here, and now we can actually start programming. So the very first thing you'll learn in almost any Java course is how to interact with the console, which is where things are printed out and your code, you can visualize and see it. So, and then the first thing you learn when interacting with the console is how to print out messages. So, in Java, if you'd like to print out something, all you need to do is this: system.out.print. And then this is very important. So when you're doing this, anything that you want to have printed out, it has to be in double quotes. So say I want to print out the word or the sentence "hello world." You can observe how I put it in double quotes. And then I can click the run button at the top to launch it, and you can see that it printed out "hello world." Now, just a quick demo of what happens if I ignore one of the quotes. And I mean, Eclipse is a great IDE because it'll tell you when you have errors, but I'm just going to go ahead with it so that you can see what happens. And then you can see string is not properly closed by a double quote, and this is why we need to put double quotes around anything we want to type or have printed out in the console.
And these are known as syntax errors. Those also could be things like division by zero errors, compiler errors. We'll go more into depth on those later.
Yeah, of course. And now, so right now what we learned is system.out.print. Now observe what happens if I want to print out something else on a new line. So I'll do system.out.print and I'll get set up with my double quotes, and I will say by world. And now I'll run it, and it'll say hello world by world, but they're on the same line. This is a problem, right? After all, we want the two to be on different lines so that the user can see that one comes after the other. But right now there's no spacing and they're on the same line. So although there is a kind of thing we can put inside the quotes to fix that problem, a much easier way is just to change print to print ln. And what print ln does is it's like print, and then the ln stands for line. So you will have a new line after whatever you've printed out. And now let's run it and see what happens. And now we have hello world by world, and they're on different lines as requested. Alright, now that we're done talking about basic print statements, we can move on to what's surrounding it. So what you might see at the top, public class main, and below that, public static void main. So there's no correlation between the public class, like the name public class main and public static void main. This is just the name of the class that I chose. And so you need to have a class surrounding your program, and you need to make sure that the name of the class matches what your file is called. So in the left hand corner here, you can see I called it main.java. If I tried to call it, say, public class main2, then I'll run it and errors again. But yeah, could not find or load main class main2, or sorry, could not find and load public class main, because it's looking for the public class main, right? As that's what would match main.java instead of called it main.to, and that's confusing the program. So now let's change. And Java is a very case-specific language, whether it's variable names or like proper capitalization. If you don't type the name correctly, you will run into errors. So now look, it's nothing except I haven't capitalized the M. If you showed this to a human, then they would understand what you meant. But computers aren't like humans. They need specific directions. And so if you make even the slightest error, a computer won't understand. It takes everything you're saying literally, and again, it can't figure out what I mean, and it tells me wrong name main. So you need to be very specific when talking to computers. Now, so that's what the class is, and then this is something called a method header, and everything inside the method. So the main method is special because it's where everything happens. You can make other methods that do other things, but the main method is where you need to, whatever you want to happen, it has to be called inside the main method. For example, if I moved my print statement out of the method and down here, well, it's not in a method, and so again we get an error. So we need to put everything we want to happen in some kind of method or in the main method so that it can be run. Now, what exactly do all of these keywords that are highlighted in purple mean? Public is a word that, to put it simply, allows our main method to interact with other methods, which is what it needs to do because, after all, it often calls upon other methods to use them. And then static, Michael, do you want to explain static?
Static means basically you don't have to create an object from the class. We'll go more in depth about that in the future. But basically, in object-oriented programming, you can create children from classes, which are essentially blueprints in coding. But the static keyword makes it so that you don't have to do that.
Precisely. And then, now this final void. So you'll see void a lot in your early days of Java programming because, so Java comes with a lot of built-in methods, like addition, for example, like the plus operator. You can think of that as its own method. And what if I did 1 plus 2? Then, and then Java knows that, and it would tell you 3. So, like if I were to make my own addition method, then I would want to have it return an integer, right? And in this case, it would be 1 plus 2, and then the integer that's being returned to us is 3. But the main method doesn't need to return or give the user anything because it's what's running everything. It's not being used for any other purpose. So we say void so that it doesn't have to return anything or give us anything. And with that, I will tell you that the void keyword is often replaced by things like int, double, string, or boolean, which are all some of the many variable types that you will encounter when you're using Java programming. So what exactly do those mean? Int, double, float, boolean, all of these may seem quite random after all but in truth it's really just simple or rather more complicated terms for very simple things. So an int is the short form for integer, which, as you know, is just a whole number with no decimals. So in Java, one thing you want to use a lot is variables. You might have learned about variables in your math class, where you might say something like x is equal to 10, y is equal to 5, what is x plus y? And you know it's 15. Computers work the same way. We use variables to hold values that we might not want to compute ourselves, or that we might want to use multiple times throughout a program. So, but I can't just say x, say I'm making a program that tells the user how old I am. So x is equal to 15, or let's call this age, right? I can't just say age is equal to 15, because again, computers are very literal. They won't understand what I'm trying to tell them. What is age? Is age a decimal? Is age an integer? Is age like a string? What is age? It doesn't know until I specify what it is at the start. I have to tell it it's an int, because it's an integer, a whole number. I am 15 years old, and so the int age is 15. Now let's observe what happens if we try to, and these numbers can be used in print statements as well. For example, if I wanted to tell the user how old I am, I could just do this. Put the, and remember, we don't surround variables with parentheses, or sorry, with double quotes, because then it will quite literally print out the word age. See? Right down here, age. And so I need to get rid of these double quotes, which will tell the computer that I'm referring to a specific variable. And then I print it out and it says 15. Now this is all nice and simple, right? But what if I wanted to print out, hi, my name is this and this, and I am this many years old. Then wouldn't I have to do something like this? Right? And then I create like a gap in between the two statements to tell it, hi, my name is Ritwik and I am. And then since I'm lazy and want to avoid typing 15, I just say age and then follow it by years old. But when I run this, it doesn't work. Why is that? Because the computer doesn't know what it's reading. I put in, hi, my name is Ritwik and I am. And then if I just got rid of everything else, then it would make sense. The computer understands it's looking at a string, and then it's done. But since I put in all these extra things at the end, it gets confused. And so now I have to put in a special kind of sign. So an easy way to remember what sign this is I'm saying, hi, my name is Ritwik and I am, plus age years old, plus age, plus years old. And this plus operator, what it does is it tells the computer all of this is part of what I want to print out, and it's okay to have these gaps in between what I'm printing out because they're all joined together by the plus. You can think of it as like an and now if I run it,
this specific technique is called string concatenation, or basically you can combine two strings. But if you notice that the age variable is actually an integer, this is a somewhat more advanced topic called typecasting, where you can convert a variable of one type to another.
yeah, and then you can see now that my sentence is mostly correct aside from a little spacing error. So I put a space at the beginning of this next one and run it again. And yeah, hi, my name is Ritwik and I am 15 years old. So this is just the first kind of type though. What if I want to use a decimal? Can I still use int? After all, 15.0 is still an integer, right? There's no... But if I do run it, then I get an error because I put a decimal point. As soon as this decimal point comes in, it becomes something called a double, or an integer followed by a decimal value. So I need to use a special kind of thing for this, and I'll say double. Again, you can just think about it as a fancy way of saying decimal. And then when I'm creating my variable double age, I cannot have it start with a number, and it has to consist of alphanumeric characters, so that's the alphabet and numbers, and then a couple exceptions are things like the dollar sign and the underscore sign. And then again, like say I want to start it with I want to have a really weird variable name, something like int percentage exponent parenthesis is equal to 1 through 3. This doesn't work because every single one of these characters isn't something that you can't have in a variable name. So make sure to avoid these when you're making a variable name. And then another thing my partner mentioned earlier is that you cannot have these special keywords, these purple things, as your variable name. I can't have int, I can't have int static. because this creates, again, syntax error on token static, so that's an error right there. Or I can't have int public, again, error. Int void as well doesn't work. So you get the idea. These keywords are not variable names. Anyway, now let's go back to my double example. So double price is equal to, and then my computer is pretty bad, it didn't cost that much, so double price is equal to 200 point, and then I'll make up a decimal, 200.31. And now, and I can use this in my print statement just as well as an int, system.out.println. Hey, my name is Michael, and my computer cost more than, and then again I have to use my plus to tell the computer it's okay to have this extra stuff. And now I run it again. Hi, my name is Michael, and my computer costs more than 200.31. And then I guess I should have said dollars at the end. So again, and then let's talk about a couple other kinds of variables real quick. So you probably won't have to use these for a while, with the exception of string, but there is boolean. And so a boolean can only ever have two values, true or false. So a boolean is actually quite useful, but only in like certain situations. Like for example, what if I wanted to tell you whether the light in my room was on or off? There's only two states it can have, on or off. I could represent this with an integer like 0 and 1, but it's easier to just use boolean. If it's true if it's on, and it's false if it's off. Or another example is it day or night? If it's day, I'll say true. If it's night, I'll say false. And so again, it's like useful in these kind of situations. And then another kind is string. So unlike the others, strings is a kind of variable that starts with a capital S, and then string, and then again I have to have my variable name, so string name is equal to, and then string is essentially a fancy way of saying like word or sentence or text bit, whatever you want to call it. But the idea of a string is that it's a variable that holds text. So in this case, it's going to hold my name, ritwikrule. And now, let's go back to my earlier example. Now, if I wanted to make a full sentence with some information about myself, I could simplify the process by just saying, hey, my name is, and then plus name, plus, and my, and I am, and now if we print this out, I get, hey, my name is ritwikrule, and I'm 15 years old, and I didn't have to type it. Now you might be thinking to yourself, isn't it easier to just type it out? But in larger programs where you have to type, where you might have to use the same number or the same variable over and over and over again, it's very important to have a variable that you can just call upon and change rather than like one specific value.
Variables are also really useful if you have a dynamic value. For example, if you're pulling the data from online, or if you have a user inputted value.
Exactly. For example, price. Say I made a mistake in my price and the price suddenly went up to 259 cents. Or $200.59. In that case, and say I had 1,000 print statements, each one involving like the price of my computer. And instead of using a variable, I just said, hey, my computer costs 200.31. And see, what would be really difficult is going to every single one of these 1000 print statements and fixing 200.31 to 200.59. But if I had used a variable, all I have to do is change price to 200.59, and every single print statement using price will just automatically update, which makes it a lot easier, trust me. Alright, and then just a quick little nod to the char kind of variable. The char is, I guess, if you wanted to be technical, you could call it char, car, whatever, but it's a shortened way of saying character. And so, character, unlike a string, is only able to hold one letter. This can, or I guess, yeah, so this can range from capital A, lowercase a, or even numbers or signs if you'd like, but it can only hold one of these at a time. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that in case you're, say this is really only useful for things like in maybe last initials or things like that, which is honestly just easier to include in your name, but it's just a little like mention so that you know it exists. Moving on from there, let's talk about variable addition. So, like I talked about earlier, you have things like, in math you might have seen x and y, and so I'll say int x is equal to 0, and int y is equal to 15. So now, if you can see this, and now what I'll do is I'll say int z is equal to x plus y. And then let's print out z. So now let's run the class, and so it tells us that it's 15. X plus y is 0 plus 15. And so what you can see here, and I could have just printed out x plus y as well, that would have worked just fine. And so you might be wondering, would this not give you something like, say, so we've been using plus so far to concatenate strings and integers. Why wouldn't it do the same here, printing out separately 0 and then 15? Well, the reason is because there's no string yet. So right now, all it's seeing is that there's two integers inside, and then they're being added. So one thing you might have heard of before is PEMDAS. And although it's a little more complicated in coding, the basic idea still holds the same. You do whatever in parentheses first, then you move on to exponents, which I guess that there's not really a basic operator for exponents, but that still holds true. And then after that you have multiplication and division from left to right, and then finally addition and subtraction from left to right as well. So, and then even here, say I wanted to do something like, I wanted to have like a space and then an exclamation mark at the end. It would still just tell me 15 and then with the exclamation mark, because it hasn't seen the string yet. So earlier my partner talked about typecasting, which is when a variable is like kind of forced into becoming a different variable so that it can like satisfy the parameters of a method or whatever it's trying to do, right? So this is fine, but what if I wanted to say 0 and then 15? In that case, what I could do is I could add a space in between these two using the plus, and now reading from left to right, I see 0. I add it to a space. Now this is a very crucial moment, because this changes it from int x equals 0 to string, it doesn't have a name, but let's call it string x. String x is equal to, and then 0 space. So it's like gone from, so the variable x still remains an integer, but for the purpose of this method, x is being typecasted to a string because that's the way that the programmer wants to use it. And then it says 15 at the end. Some more forceful methods of typecasting are, for example, if I wanted to turn a double into an int to get rid of the decimal point at the end. So I have double A is equal to 15.6. And then I have int A is equal to, or sorry, we can have to, so I'll say int S is equal to A. And right now this is an error because they have mismatching types. An int cannot be a double. But if I put this in parentheses, then it reads this from left to right, and this little operator here tells us, oh, whatever comes after this is going to be an int. And then it sees A, turns it into, and it turns A into, or just for the purpose of this, just for the purpose of creating S, it turns A into an integer so that the statement can execute without any problems. So then I'll print out F just to show you what happens. And it won't be 15.6 because they don't have, integers will never have decimal points. Instead, because I converted A to an integer, all it did, no rounding or anything like that, right? After all, computers are inherently like simple creatures. Instead, to simplify the problem, it just chops off the decimal point. And that's how we ended up with 15. So even if I have 15.99999, it'll still just simplify to 15. And then finally, let's cover one more kind of addition. So what if I'm adding an int and a double? What would happen? Int x is, or sorry, I'm running out of variable names, but int b is equal to 2, double c is equal to 401.29. Now, what happens if I add them? System .out.println, and then I'll add b plus c, and let's see what happens. Oh, 403.29. What this does is double, you can think of it as like a hierarchy, right? Double is like above int, and so when you add the two together, it turns the int into when you add the two together, it doesn't care about if you're adding a double and an int or a double and a double. The end result will keep the decimal. And so, as you can see here, it added 2 to the value of 401.29, and we get our final value of 403.29. Now then, one more thing I want to talk about quickly is comments. So comments are honestly one of the most useful things for programmers to have. Not for yourself usually. Usually you can understand your own code. But some people can't. Say I gave this code to like my 5-year-old brother. And if he were to try and read this, then it wouldn't make any sense to him, right? But any 5-year-old, most of them anyway, can read. And so what I do is in Java, to add comments, you do 2 forward-facing slashes, and whatever comes after it will be a comment. So if I tell the following statements are used to print out information about the programmer, and then I'll do / again. Now I am creating variables demonstrating addition, typecasting, etc. So, and now at least you can get the general overview of what the program is doing. And again, you don't just have to use comments like to tell what you're doing. they're also a very useful debugging tool. Michael, can you tell us why?
Basically, you can use comments to keep track of what variables do at certain times, and then if you encounter a logic error, basically you can use your comments to figure out what exactly is going on and why your error is happening.
Exactly. So an example is one thing in Java that I've forgotten to mention is that at the end of like almost everything, aside from like these method headers up here, for these basic one-liner statements, I need to have a semicolon at the end. Because again, computers are like inherently primitive, right? They need something in Java at least to tell them where my statement has ended. And in this case, the semicolon is what marks where my statement has ended. So say I forget to put a semicolon. Now Java's confused. It doesn't know what to do, right? So I run it, and here it's easy to identify the problem. But after all, my program is only like 39 lines long. But in some of the bigger programs that are thousands of lines long, what I might want to do is like isolate certain sections. So I'll comment this out, I'll run it, and oh look, the problem's gone. So now I know what the problem is. I go over here and fix it, and then I run it, and now that I've used comments to debug and fix the problem, my program runs as intended. So yeah, that's just a little debugging tool. And then one more thing is for getting rid of entire sections without having to press the / button that many times, you can do slash asterisk asterisk slash, and so this creates a multi-line comment, which again, this is just useful for getting like commenting out these big sections of code instead of just pressing the //. Alright, now one more thing. This wraps up about everything you'll need to know in unit 1. I guess one thing you might want to play with by yourself is like experimenting with division, which is division, multiplication, which is represented by an asterisk, and then plus for addition, minus for subtraction. And so just play with these by yourself, experiment with how adding integers, adding doubles and integers, and so just play with that by yourself. And then one site I would like to recommend, something to help you improve your coding skills outside of watching these videos, is Practice It. Or rather, I would have recommended Practice It, but unfortunately it's going to be discontinued quite soon. However, there is thankfully an alternative. So if you look down here, you'll see Code Step by Step, made by the author Marty Stepp, who also wrote many of the textbooks. And so if I go to Code Step by Step, I can create an account if I'd like, but I can just go straight to practice. Since you're taking APCSA, which is written all in Java, we'll go here, Java. And this is all alphabetical order, and it actually covers a lot of the topics you'll learn over the year. But for now, all we need to worry about is console output. So let's go here, and then hello world. So this is like, you'll need to make an account to solve your problem, but just write a program. So for example, I could write, if you can see up in my search bar, system.out.println, can't forget the double parentheses, hello, comma, world, ending with the good old semicolon. And then if I submitted this, I'm sure that it would say like, oh, and then it tells you to write a complete class. So you can just use like the example I showed you above, a public class print, and then just make sure to have this statement wrapped in a method in a class, and you should be fine. And that wraps up this video. So I'd like to thank you all for watching, and a couple things I'd like to say before I go. Please like and subscribe, because it really helps the channel grow and spread like our teaching to more and more students. After all, we'd like as many of you as possible to get good scores on your AP exams. And also, so if any of you have coding problems related to the curriculum, feel free to leave it in the description, or we'll provide emails as well that you can just email your problems us to, and we'll read it and get back to you. And so just again, if you have any problems that you'd like us to solve, feel free to submit them and we can look them over. Thank you. Bye.